Welcome to the Adam Blicker Show, dissecting high performance in tennis.
An increasing amount of data is becoming available within tennis. As coaches, we need to navigate through the jungle of information. How do we interpret the data? What stats are true but not relevant? And ultimately, how can stats help player development, scouting of opponents, as well as inform us about winning patterns of play? Mike James helps us do exactly that. He is a strategy analyst, which means that he interprets data combined with video of matches to help players and their teams with game development, scouting reports, and preseason content based on the previous year's matches. In this interview, Mike explains how Djokovic is fooling us. He explains how the best players in the world have a below 50 winning percentage from the baseline, and he helps us understand how data can inform us about what to do on the practice court. Without further ado, please welcome Mike James. Mike, welcome to the show.
Adam, thank you for having me.
I'm really happy that you are reopening the podcast. That has been a long podcast vacation for me. So I'm happy that we are making this one, the first one back, which I'm sure will be a great one. Mike, tell me the story of how you became a strategy analyst.
Working with juniors that were playing Tennis Europe's, ITFs, and you're going through the levels, I was thinking, how can I create buy-in and how can I help players at a professional level, even though I've not played professional tennis? And I would say I drew a lot of inspiration from coaches in other sports, such as Jose Mourinho, who's probably the most famous coach that hasn't played soccer at a high level. And for me, using technology is a great way to support players. From my point of view, using technology, it's been a huge support for me to actually show information to players. And when I started to get into the futures level, challenger level, I wanted to use a tool and something that I could basically present facts and information. So using a Dartfish, which is the tool that I use, has been a huge help to me show players winning patterns. I think you can use video in many different ways. You can use video from a psychological point of view, a technical point of view, and a tactical point of view.
Walk me through the steps of what it is you do for the players you work with.
I would say there's three areas really that I use. One would be player development and game development for juniors. Videoing matches of juniors and steepening their learning curve and making them understand what they are doing tactically and how relevant that is to their technique, which is, as we know, developing players and developing juniors is very, very important. The other side would be creating preseason content for professionals. So actually reviewing the season, reviewing the year's worth of matches and breaking down key areas that I think will help for the preseason. So I will always present to the head coach or the support team my views of what I see and what I pick out. And then they might come back to me and go, okay, well, we think this area, we want to dig deeper into this area. Can you go and search more here? And I would say videoing a tennis match is a bit like an MRI scan when you go to the hospital. So you can go as deep as you want to in any direction, which for me is an amazing situation, because you might watch a tennis match and you see the forehand, you see a player hit 9 winners on the forehand and you feel the forehand was good today. But actually, in reality, the forehand was affecting the play with more forced errors from the opponent and there was more mistakes from the forehand. So the video allows you to chop the parts of the match that you want to see, which is really, really important. And then the third area that I look at is scouting. So scouting opposition for players at tournaments, singles and doubles. And I think, again, this is a huge area that we are behind in tennis. If you look at NFL, you look at soccer, you look at rugby union, these sports have been doing scouting with video for 10 years plus. So from a tennis point of view, I think we're catching up with that. But having a situation where the player A goes onto court and they have a feeling of the game style of the player and the patterns that their opponent is going to try to put on them creates a huge advantage for the player.
And help me out here, being a novice and trying to understand, first of all, the more stats that are continuously getting available, but also understanding when we are looking through the eyes of you. For instance, in a scouting report, what are the top 3, for instance, interesting things you are looking at?
Just to make clear, which is very important, everybody can see statistics nowadays on the TV and everybody can find stats on players on different websites and this sort of thing. My job as an analyst and a strategy or tactical analyst is to take those numbers and look at them and how do they affect the tactical side of the game and how do they ultimately make the player win. So I think from a scouting report, I will give you the biggest part of the scouting report that I think is maybe the most important, and that is breaking down the juice side of the court and looking at that and the advantage side of the court. So when I'm looking at the match, I'm actually looking at the play that happens when the point starts from the juice and when the point starts from the ad, because at the end of the day, you don't win tennis matches unless you win at the end of something, the end of the game, the end of the set, the end of the match. So the advantage side of the court, from the score point of view, you have love 40, 40 love, 30, 40, 40, 30, advantage in, advantage out. So you have all of those score situations that create the opportunity to end the game, the set, the match. On the juice side, the only time you have that is 15-40 or 40-15. So 77% of break points come on the advantage side of the court. So for me, now when we're talking about looking at winning plays and winning information, the advantage side of the court is where the match is finished. The juice side of the court is the setup side.
When you look at the setup in juice side and the finish off in ad side, what are some of the things that could be told to the players that you are working with there? What would an example be?
On the match report we're using, linked to the scouting report, the game, as we know, famously at the moment is being talked about and is totally correct, that 70% of points, if we coded 100 matches, 70% of points would be between 0 and 4. So that's serve +1, return +1. So we really are looking heavily at where the serve goes, what type of shot are you hitting on the next ball? Is it a forehand or backhand? Are you in attack, neutral and defense? And then for the returner, are we getting an opportunity? One, are we getting the ball in play enough? And two, where are we putting the ball in the zone to create the best opportunity to break serve? So for me, that's really, really important.
All right. So basically, a lot of the patterns and a lot of the feedback is on the first 4 shots of the rally, no matter whether we're talking juice side or ad side.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that gets misconstrued at the moment, and I want to clear this up on here, which is a great platform to do, is now coaches are going, the match is only 0 to 4. I'm not going to train volume. I don't believe in training volume. When I see academies and players training with rallies that have got a tempo of 30, 40 balls before they have a break, I don't believe in that. However, I don't believe in just training the serve in the first ball and feeling like we're going to get that done. Because when you're looking at some of the top players in the world, so let me take Stan Wawrinka against Novak Djokovic. When they play, their 0 to 4 zone goes around 55%. So it drops down 15% from that 70 zone. So they are playing more medium rallies, which you're considering as secondary pattern rallies, because the first pattern is the serve +1, return +1. The secondary pattern is when we're getting into medium and long rallies. And the other thing that I haven't got the actual numbers on yet, but I'm really looking into at the moment, which I'm finding interesting, is when we get to a key point, and we can argue now what is a key point, when there's more pressure or pressure point, for me, the rally zone goes up a lot more. So we're getting in because there's more on it. So that the serve plus one tends to not happen so much, and we're getting into these medium to long rally zones on the big points. I haven't got numbers to back that up. That's a feeling that I'm going to find out over the next 12 months. But for me, we've got to remember that those guys, particularly again, if you put Murray and Novak together, this 70% doesn't really happen as much.
If we then take the returner's role or the server's role, what differences do you see when you are analyzing the first four shots and the patterns of play?
Let me go on serve first. Okay, so for me, whether you're female or male, you're looking to hit a serve that is going to allow you to play a forehand and make you in control of the rally. So you need to know what direction the serve goes, in which situation, that's going to allow you to be most effective. And also, again, when we're working with players, we can take season data and find out how well are they hitting their wide serve on the deuce, but also how well are they hitting it at 15-40? Is there a difference? So these things we're looking at all the time. Regards to return, I think that's a really interesting one because you have the option to drive the ball, block the ball. You can back up like Rafa's doing or Stan's doing on the second serve, or you can come tight and inside the baseline like Roger's doing. Do you slice the ball as well, or do you hit the ball with topspin? All of these things are linked to game style and the strategy that you want to play on the surface, on the conditions. We play a sport. There is no home venue, okay, like a soccer team. So every week you're using different balls, different surfaces, different altitude, non-altitude. Is it cold? Is it hot? All of these things affect the game plan and the strategy that you're going to implement. The numbers tend to be the same in certain situations. We know 70% of returns on the ATP Tour come back into play. We know 80% on the WTA Tour come back into play. But where are you putting the ball and when are the key parts of information with each player that makes a difference.
4 years ago, I saw a presentation with a guy from Germany called Philipp Born. He was looking into what he termed as serving patterns and talked, for instance, about the serve out wide due side and then playing to the open court. At that point, he was conducting a PhD, some studies on statistics on the ATP, and talked about the most used patterns and the most effective patterns on tour. Is that something where we are also getting more information, or is it too general to talk about that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. We are getting more information now, and I think if the viewers now can imagine the court being split into 4 quarters, A, B, C, and D. So A being the forehand, the wide forehand side of the right-hander. You're starting to see zones on the court that are definitely becoming used a lot more. And the 1-2 pattern is happening where you're looking for players to play from C on their forehand, aggressive to C to make the other player play the backhand, and then break the tram line to D or go to A. Now, that's a good challenge for the listeners here to imagine that on the court. But we are seeing, absolutely, we are seeing patterns that are happening. And again, it's how you look at the court. And we are definitely seeing more information coming out now about winning patterns. And I got asked the other day, does that make the game more predictable for the players? And my answer to that was no, it just raises the level, it raises the bar.
From your perspective, what are some of the key statistics that you are looking into and that interest you?
Key stats are amount of returns in play, where we are serving to when, and the court position of the player. I think the court position of the player is going to determine the game style and is going to determine what you can do in the rally to make a difference. So we know that the best players in the world from the baseline have got a below 50% ratio of winning percentage. Now that sounds crazy. So the best players in the world are winning from the baseline 48% of the time. But of course, the whole match is not played at the baseline. We've got the net to consider. It's an interesting concept. And I was talking this with a player the other day on the court, that obviously when you serve the ball in, you start the point from the baseline, okay, unless you serve and volley. So if you know that the winning percentage with the best players is 48% from the baseline, and you know that at the net it's 65%, might I add, then why don't you get to the net more? So for me, you're seeing now, I'll give you a stat from Djokovic. I've done a lot of scouting on Novak Djokovic this year and looking at him. And in 2016, when he played the US Open final, he came to net 5 times. In the 2018 final, he came to net over 30. So that is not by accident. Of course, he didn't play the same player, but he is playing more vertical now, Djokovic. He's playing a lot more vertical. Obviously, we're very aware that Federer is doing the same, and he's keeping the point shorter, and that's been happening since the beginning of 2017. So the best players now are playing a lot more vertical, and they're getting the job done quicker, and they're getting it done at net when the opportunity is there. People have this vision when they come home from a day's working and they put match highlights on from Djokovic, and they see the highlight reel, 9+ rally, Djokovic sliding on the full stretch from the baseline, hitting a passing shot or retrieving ridiculous balls. But the reality is, even someone like him, he's playing more vertical and getting a lot more done at the net.
And a statistic like that, the pros, even from the baseline, is only winning 48% of the time from the baseline. I guess, and correct me here if I'm wrong, that is a stat that tells us, combined with 65% from the net, that we should play more vertical. This is a stat from the pros. If we do not happen to be with a pro, but we are working with developing juniors, how much do we know about, should we simulate the same circumstances? Is it true to some extent that it's the same for juniors, or is there a large difference?
It's a great question. I think, first of all, there's limited data out there for juniors between 12 and 18. First of all, I think if you're talking about game development for juniors, you have to, for me, when you're working with a junior, let's say a 13-year-old, if they are on track to turn professional, the professional game when they enter the professional tour is not going to look the same as it does today. So we have to train more skillful players. We have to give players the idea that if we go back in the 90s when it was very, very easy to go, here's a serve and volleyer, here's a defensive baseliner, an aggressive baseliner, a counter puncher. Okay, if I think of Agassi, Sampras, Hewitt, those guys, you can really block them off. Roddick, you can block them off in their skill sets of what they were world class at. Fast forward 20 years later, you cannot say that Rafael Nadal is a defensive baseliner only or aggressive baseline only. He can do everything. Djokovic can do everything. Federer can do everything. The women's tour now, Andreescu is coming out here now and really showing everybody, how the women can be super skillful and super powerful. It used to be that with a female game, you were either skillful or you nailed the ball very, very hard. Now the next generation of female players, for me, are going to be able to do both. Osaka and Andreescu played an unbelievable match the other week, and that, to me, is the future of the game. You're going to have to, as a junior going into the professional tour, you're going to have the total package.
So I would guess a player like Barty is showing us the same from the women's tour.
Absolutely, and I think she's a very good example of physical profile. She's very small, and often you look at ranking correlation actually relates to height and physicality, but Halep and Barty are two anomalies on the women's tour within that. They are below average height for their ranking, but you look at their skill set and what they can do with a tennis ball and their mindset, and they're a different gravy, as we say in the UK.
Mike, tell me some more. Now I'm getting curious. Ranking correlating to height?
Yeah, I saw this the other week. I'm not too sure whether the person who showed me this wants me to mention them on the podcast, so I'm going to keep it quiet. But I've not found this out myself, but I've seen some data that shows exactly that. So what is interesting is that if the player is very tall and it isn't doesn't have a good ranking, then maybe we need to look at them and look at their game style and their development, and maybe they're playing the wrong game style. I mean, let me give a stupid example. If I'm 1m95 and I'm playing 4 meters behind the baseline, I'm playing the wrong game style for myself. So, but I did see some data that hopefully is coming out soon, but I don't want to expose the person that's been correlating that, if that's okay.
That's perfectly fine. That's super cool. Other examples of data, because I think that's where the layman like myself can get to understand what stats actually mean and how we can transform them into something that we understand. Something similar to the 48% from the baseline and being more vertical in the court. Any examples of that?
Okay, I'm gonna slightly change and not answer that question, but answer it in a totally different way.
Yes, I'm ready.
To me, if I give a coach or a player a match report without the video, it can be translated and the information can be taken in totally different ways. That's why the video side is extremely important. So when I'm working with support teams or players or academies, they're always being given the match report and the video, and that then links in. I'll give you an example. I was looking, analysing a junior player at the Good to Great Tennis Academy in Stockholm, and the coach wanted to see the player's forehand winners, and this was the first ball after serve forehand winners, and the player hit 9 in the match. What was really, really interesting, when you go in and you look at the report, you can see the amount of winners that the player has played, and that looks quite impressive from that situation. When you go into the video and you look at the score, he played all of his 9 winners at the beginning of a game. So the game is love all. Boom, forehand winner, forehand winner. Then when we start to look at the points where, like I talked about earlier, where we're 30-40, break point, game point, there wasn't a forehand winner to be in sight. So that tells me, and it told the coach and the player, when the stakes are a little bit lower in the game, he's more relaxed, more loose, more expressive. Decision-making may be a little bit better, and he's producing winning tennis. When it gets closer to the end of something, it was becoming more error-based. So for me, the video is so, so important. I would recommend every coach to go out there, even if they don't have the ability to code like we do and break down the match. Even watching the video there is a great learning tool for players and support teams.
So combining the stats with the video gives the necessary opportunity to interpret the data correctly.
Absolutely. And sometimes, again, with the video, when I'm doing a scouting report for a player, I'll create highlight reels and key visuals that I send to the support team. So I'll give them the scouting report, but go, hey, in my opinion as a coach and as an analyst, this is the key area, and I will send 7 or 8 minutes of that repeatable pattern happening. Because I think from the player's point of view, to sit there and watch a 9-minute video of successful plays, I think is, again, from visualization, and you're the psychologist in the room here, I think it adds a little bit more weight and confidence for the player going into the match, seeing that happening over and over again.
And providing a team with both scouting reports, but also some reports on their own game. I understand it's not necessarily an either or, but probably both and. How much emphasis is on the scouting of opponents, and how much emphasis is on the player themselves?
It's a great question, Adam. I think it purely comes down to where the player is in their career and what capability they have. So I've been fortunate enough over the last year to be working with Magnus Norman and helping support him with Stan Wawrinka. And we started our collaboration originally because Magnus wanted for me to compare Stan before his knee injury and after his knee injury. And you're talking there, that's about Stan's game. You know, Magnus wanted to dig deep into Stan's game and help him for his preseason last year. We all know Stan Wawrinka, and if he is playing at his level, there are very few players that can get near him. So if you're working with someone like Stan Wawrinka, it's all about you a lot of the time. So 8 out of 10 matches, it's about his level. And maybe 2 out of 10, they want that support with scouting and looking at the opponent. If you're coming down the ladder to a player that is just breaking into top 100, again, you're looking at their game development all the time, but also they're new to the tour, so they haven't played these players. So they want that information on player X. What are they going to be like today? If someone like Stan, who's 35 next year, a lot of the players that I've looked at with Magnus this year, Stan's already played. So we have a history behind with that player. Someone new coming into the tour, you've then got a different situation, if that makes sense.
Makes complete sense. Let's drag you on a little bit, because we're now talking about some of the stats that we can use in practices and to inform us, the scouting reports and so on. I would also imagine that as there are more and more statistics available, it's also going to be a little bit of a jungle to navigate through, and what is relevant, what can we use. Even some statistics that might be true is maybe not something that is actually telling us something. An example, I don't know if this is true, I'm probably making a fool out of myself, but could be, you could probably help me out here, but could be a statistic like if you get first to 30, then there is a high degree of probability of you winning the game. But does that then necessarily mean that we should practice a lot getting to 31st?
That's a great question. And I think if we go back to the winning zone in rally length, 0 to 4, if I'm playing you, Adam, and I get to 54% of the points won in the 0 to 4 zone only, I have a 90% chance of winning the tennis match. So that zone is crucial, absolutely crucial. So it doesn't matter that all of the 9+ rallies that we played, I won all of them, okay? If you're winning the 54% 0 to 4, where the majority of the match happens, you're going to beat me 9 times out of 10. So going back to what I said earlier, the game really is serve +1, return +1. Obviously, we talked about what is overlooked a little bit sometimes when stress comes into it, and we're talking about Djokovic and Wawrinka, but I think the focus needs to be on that zone. The winning zone is 0 to 4, serve and first ball. Can you take care of that? Can you be a sniper and actually do damage there? Because most of the match is played there. If I was to show you a match report now, you would see something like 100 points are played 0 to 4, then it would drop 50 points 5 to 8, and then it would drop sort of again to sort of 10 or 15 points +9. So it absolutely tails off these long rallies. It will be interesting when we get more and more data coming out on the junior side of the game, because the question is, can the juniors repeat? Can they hurt enough to create errors? And I'm talking, let's say, under 12s now. Or do they just put the ball back in the court and rally all day? When we get more data on that, I'll be more and more interested.
And before we change gears and jump into some rapid fire questions, anything that we haven't touched upon that you would like to touch upon?
I think we are genuinely behind as a sport in analytics and data and information and using it in video. So if we think about NFL or soccer, the soccer match is played on Saturday, the players come in on Monday, they watch the match back, they often watch the match broken down into key areas that are relevant for the player. So the defenders will watch the corners and free kicks, how they dealt with that defensively. The attacking players will look at the shots on goal and the amount of shots and focus on that. I think tennis needs to get up to speed with this, and I think it is, but there's still too much thought that we're going to train. And I'll give you an example, okay? The classic one, when I go into academies or other centres and I see the coach, I call playing to the balcony. So they've took the €50 for the training session. The parents are watching on the balcony, and really the coach is more focused about the player hitting a lot of balls, making a lot of things happen, make the player sweaty, and they come off court and they're like, I worked really hard today. But actually, for that hour or hour and a half, you haven't trained the game that you're going to play on Saturday. It's like a soccer team going out and training on Wednesday, and they are only running with the ball up and down the pitch and keeping the ball at the feet. They are not doing that. They are practicing free kicks, corners, set pieces, penalties. They're breaking it all down so it's relevant for Saturday. In tennis, we don't do that. We will do a 1 hour session. 50 minutes will be from the back of the court, training volume, and then maybe 10 minutes at the end practicing the serve. And this always gets me because we practice the serve when the player is tired. Why do we not practice the serve at the beginning of the session? And why don't we use the serve to feed the ball in all the time? You know, let's not feed the ball in underarm today. Let's do everything. We feed the ball in, we feed it overarm. So those things really irritate me. And I'll credit Craig O'Shaughnessy here for his comment where he talks about the practice court is broken. I totally agree. And I think when we get everybody training the game from a tech-tac point of view, the game will increase and continue to get better.
Any examples beside, I think you explained yourself very well. When we're talking about the practice court being broken, it's about not moving the serve and the return up in the start of our practices, because it's technically it's a difficult shot, and practicing from the start, and also under prioritizing them in general compared to, for instance, the neutral skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in every tennis session we need to train attack, neutral and defense, but I think we need to keep the focus always around the serve and the return if we are going to develop very good tennis players. That's my opinion. There'll be people listening now that disagree, but in my opinion, the serve and the return, the most common rally number is 1. Yes, we both know that. You put your finger up there, is 1. So people go to me, you know, even some coaches now go to me, it's not 1. And I will explain this now for all the listeners out there that don't agree with me. The serve goes in, it's an ace. The serve goes in, the return goes in the net. That's still 1. The serve goes in, the return goes out. That's still 1. That happens most. So by far and away, the serve is the most important stroke to focus on. Then the return is the second most important stroke to focus on, and making balls in the court. So for me, the mentality needs to change that we focus on that. And I'm not saying we don't train everything else. Of course we do. But I think we need to have drills and train patterns in 5 to 8 zone a lot. And when I see rallies going on 25, 30 shots, it is not the game of tennis. I'll give you one more stat that is a rough stat, but it's pretty on the money. I know the amount. Okay, US Open 2015, okay, meant the whole of the men's tournament. How many rallies were over 30 shots? 9. And there was over 31,000 points played. So why are we doing a drill where the player is hitting 25, 30 balls? It's not relevant. It's not the game.
We might never get to the rapid fire questions because I keep getting on things that I want to ask you about when I got you here, because you spiked my curiosity. A big one is also, obviously, again, there is a difference on top 100 tennis and junior development, but consistency and not making mistakes versus aggression.
Tennis is a game of errors. If you take 100 tennis matches, you're going to see 30% of winners, 70% are going to be unforced errors or forced errors. So it's about forcing the miss and not missing. So if you create an opportunity when you can hit a winner, great. Let's take Stan Wawrinka again as another example. Stan's ability of being able to melt the tennis ball with his forehand or backhand creates the player to miss. So Stan knows when he's playing Novak that Novak's going to get his racket on the ball. He's going to touch the ball. Novak is the best player in the world ever at getting to tennis balls. But the quality of Stan's ball is going to be so good that he knows that Novak will force a mistake. He will make Novak make the mistake. So we have to create players that are powerful. Tennis is a power sport. So if you can create a skillful player who's powerful. You're in a good situation, Adam. It'd be very exciting.
All right, Mike. Let's get around to it and change gears a little bit and go into some rapid fire questions. How do you go about getting better as a coach?
Put yourself in uncomfortable situations and get to the point when you put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and it actually feels comfortable. I think then you've probably made it.
What person or books has inspired you the most as a tennis coach?
My mentor for the last 8 years has been Claudio Pistolesi. I met Claudio on a coaching course in London in 2010 when he was coaching Daniela Hanchikova, and I got drawn to the way he spoke, his body language, and what he was saying in the conference. And I think it took me maybe a month before I went out and visited him in an academy in Germany. And I shadowed him and watched him coach in Italy and in the States, where he lives now. And for me, he's been the biggest inspiration in my career. He taught me a lot about the mental side of the game and understanding empathy and actually looking at the sport from the player's eyes, which I can only do because I didn't play at a high level. So I only have that option. So Claudio has been an unbelievable inspiration for me. And I was fortunate enough in 2015 when Claudio set up Claudio Pistolesi Enterprise that he wanted me involved in the team there, in the travelling coach team, delivering on camps, coach education. So it's been an unbelievable ride over the last 4 years with Claudio, particularly with Claudio Pistolesi Enterprise. And I really cannot thank him enough. An amazing man. Any
books that has inspired you especially?
Louis Kayer's Doubles Tactics book is unbelievable. There is a guy by the name of Keith Reynolds, who is another mentor of mine, who wrote The Tennis Coach's Toolkit. That is also another unbelievable book. But that, for me, those two are absolutely superb. I recommend every coach to go on Amazon now and hunt for those two.
Next question I'm particularly excited about when it's you answering it. What are the things that you believe that everyone else think is crazy?
Well, the crazy part to my answer will probably be, I think in the next 10 years, we could easily see the female and male world number ones being 40 years old. There's the crazy part, because these guys are not going away. We're looking, we're in the week of the O2, the ATP finals at the moment at the O2, and you've got Roger there, 38 and a half, Nadal 32 or 33, Novak 32. Because of the teams around these guys today, the knowledge about nutrition, sports science, sleep patterns, analytics, all of these things allow the player, and the money in the game at that level, allow the player to carry on longer. Their schedules can be shorter and they can have more off time because they're getting to the end of the tournament, they're picking up the points, they can have a week off or two of a training block to develop their game. So I really can see whether we see Roger managing to somehow become world number one in 18 months, I don't know, but I can really see the first four, maybe it's the first, I don't know, you tell me, but both male and female players being world number one at 40 years of age. Of course, we have like Yannick Sinner breaking into the top 100, Felix Aliassime. Those guys are freaks of nature. That will always happen. We know that on average, if you're going to be top 100, you're going to break in at the age of 23, 24, and the average age of the top 100 at the moment is 29. That curve has been going up for the last 15 years. Why will it change? Because these guys are able to play longer.
What do you consider the biggest waste of time or biggest myth in tennis?
I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. The practice court is broken, and as a coach, when you step onto the court, what are you doing today to make a difference to the player at their next tournament or in the future? Don't please the crowd on the balcony to keep your job. I think that is the worst thing that we see in the sport, that we see coaches wanting to keep their job, so they are crowd pleasers and they turn into actors on the court to keep the job. Focus on doing the right things for game development and educate the family, educate the parents and the people around the player, so you can do your job really, really well.
What have you changed your mind about the last couple of years?
When Andy Murray was doing extremely well and was world number one, and him and Novak were having these phenomenal rallies, and they were both playing a lot from the baseline, maybe then you think, okay, that's how the game is going to be. And then Federer comes out and Nadal comes out after their 6-month break in 2017. They play differently and change their game style. So for me, not that I've changed my mind, but I'm more aware of that the game has trends. And we're getting Novak and Roger and Rafa playing a lot more vertical now. I'm sure Andy Murray will be doing this after his new hip. So that also depends on court surfaces and the balls. But I believe that the game goes in cycles, and then when we have the new cycle of what we used to have, it's a better version. So do I think we're going to see certain volleying every other point like we saw Rafa and Ivanisevic? Probably not, but definitely not, if that makes sense. We don't know where it's going to go, but the game has trends.
If you could give one advice for coaches, players, or parents listening, what would that be?
Go out there, learn from other cultures, other coaches, different academies. Tennis is an international game. Don't be in the goldfish bowl of your own club or even country, because one thing that I've been fortunate enough to travel over the last 5 or 6 years and has been, I've coached and travelled with Japanese players from Thailand, Sweden, Italy, UK, America, Brazil. And when you're traveling with a guy from Japan compared to a guy from Italy, it's like chalk and cheese with the culture, with the food, the sleeping, timekeeping, mentality, how you talk to them, are totally different. And for me, that's made me grow so much as a coach, actually coaching players from different cultures and different backgrounds.
Mike, anything you would like to add that we haven't covered in the time that we have spent with each other this evening?
No, just to say, Adam, I'm privileged, and I really appreciate you putting me on this stage. I've been a big admirer of your podcast for a while now, so thank you for this. If anybody wants to reach out to me, they can find me on social media at Mike James Sports, and I'd be happy to answer anybody's questions, and please get in touch with me.
That was my very last question, where people could find you. I enjoy very much myself to follow what you're putting out there. I think even though I have followed you, I'm still quite a novice on understanding everything that you are doing. But I think you're doing a great job of informing and educating via social media. So my best recommendations of doing just that on various different social medias. Mike, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Adam.
Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Ping me on Twitter and let me know your favorite takeaway. Have a great day.